upside down. The state Senate has been working to identify ways to support the unique challenges our world faces and this city faces for families, healthcare workers, small business owners, including restaurants, homeowners, and renters. Right out of the gates, when COVID hit, we got together, the House and the Senate. We knew we had to take some decisive action right away to support the public during this public health crisis. We immediately made $15 million in emergency funding available to local Board of Health, so they could begin to provide personal protective equipment to their workers, begin testing and kind of tracing some of the positive cases that we had early on and throughout this pandemic. Another thing we did was expanding the unemployment insurance benefits. Really, the greatest expansion of unemployment benefits that this Commonwealth has ever seen as to who could access these benefits. The waiting time was severely reduced. Typically for unemployment, you can wait up to 17 days. We reduced the waiting period to only 2 days. We substantially increased the net of who would be covered in unemployment insurance, including 1099 workers, restaurant workers, and some people that never really have paid into unemployment benefits. We had expansive and substantial help from the federal government in being able to do so. With those federal benefits, we're able to expand some access to safety net resources for those with dependent children, as well as the elderly, disabled, and other vulnerable populations in the Commonwealth. The legislature took the substantial steps to allow people to vote by mail in our elections. I would say that program certainly did work in this past primary. The state saw about 1.7 million ballots cast, which is the largest of any amount of votes ever cast in a primary or any election. So it's something that we were able to get done working with the House and the Senate to ensure that all people have access to the ballot box, that no one has to risk their own personal health by getting out and casting their votes. The restaurant industry, especially in the North End, was adversely hit by by COVID and the impacts that came with the shutdown of the city and the state. We did what we could to forego tax payments for restaurants early on and during the pandemic and help do what we could as a state to keep them going. I know the city took decisive action too in helping them with outdoor dining and so on. We were also able to expand takeout to allow restaurants and bars to also sell cocktails with their takeout. So I think it kind of shows we were really trying to do everything we could, leaves no stone unturned. I met with many of the owners of restaurants in the North End due to the pandemic, talked to many of them over the phone, and we did the best we could to kind of fill their needs and the needs of their workers during these most difficult times. And I want to thank them for their patience, quite honestly, as we got through some of these steps through the legislature. We also, for the first time, had placed an eviction and foreclosure moratorium to protect renters and homeowners who have mortgages. We're asking people to stay home during this pandemic. It's a difficult process if people are being evicted and have nowhere to go. The governor then extended that moratorium until October 15th. So that's an important date to keep in mind for the short term. Also in the interim budget, the state is still without a budget. I know Chairman Michlewitz in the House and Chairman Rodriguez in the Senate are working very hard to get some work done on a budget in very uncertain times. I think Aaron will probably get into it, but the state could be facing about a $5 billion deficit. $5 billion out of a almost $40 billion budget is a substantial hit to kind of mostly essential programming that we provide through the Commonwealth. I mean, that's local aid, money for infrastructure, for roads, as well as money for education. So in the short term, with interim budgets, we're able to get another $10 million in the meantime for small business assistance grants, focusing on minorities, women, and veteran-owned businesses in underserved areas, as well as $10 million to support wage supports for workers who are directly impacted by COVID-19. But we will continue to address the budget conserves as we go into fiscal year 21, and our top priorities will remain addressing this public health crisis and the economic conditions that we're left with because of the same. I just want to remind everyone, as most of you know, the first day of school for Boston Public Schools was yesterday, and BPS will be following a phased-in hybrid model this year. I'd also invite anyone who is interested to join me for a coffee hour, virtual coffee hour, I should say, I guess, next Tuesday, September 29th at 6 p.m. To discuss back to school as it relates to COVID-19. I will have some information to share from DESE, which is the state's agency administration that deals with schooling. And we really want to hear from you, parents, families, and teachers, and how the reopening of schools has affected everyone. Students are right now virtually learning in Boston, but beginning October 1, BPS will be beginning a hybrid model where some students will be in the buildings. And those students will include English language learners, students with disabilities, students experiencing homelessness, and kind of youngest to oldest students will be phased back to school. But if you have any questions or would like any updates, resources from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, please feel free to reach out for me. Luigi has put my contact information in the chat box. In dealing with some of the legislature unrelated to COVID that the Commonwealth was facing in the, anyway, in this year, 2020, as chair of the Transportation Committee in the Senate, I'm happy to report that both chambers have passed the transportation bond bill, which makes a $17 billion investment in the modernization and reforming the Commonwealth's transportation system. Some of the needs include creating a blue and red line connector. As many as you know, it's something that has been promised to the neighborhoods on either side of the tunnel since the big dig happened. So we are going to make do on that, hopefully in the next 5 years, and creating some funding for that. We've also invested $695 million in the Green Line Extension project. And I, working with Chairman Michlewitz, was able to secure an additional $5.5 million for the North End neighborhood, including a $3 million redesign of State Street to better serve pedestrians, bikers, and motorists in and around that area. This bill, as many of you have heard me discuss in prior kind of updates, legislative updates, does take substantial steps in addressing the Commonwealth's congestion crisis. We are seeing that come back now as we hopefully head out of the tunnel on some of this COVID related issues. We're seeing traffic come back. MassDOT estimates that between 80 and 85% of the pre-COVID traffic is now back on the roads. So it's a problem that's plagued us for a long time, and that'll probably come back before anything else, unfortunately, as we come out of this, is traffic. So we've established a commission that will study the best method for implementing variable and expanded tolling on the Commonwealth's road. That is the #1 thing across the country that has proven to work in dealing with congestion issues. And secondly, as it relates to TNCs, transportation network companies, your Ubers and your Lyfts, we are now requiring, and this is something I heard a lot from NEWRA on, especially Ford Cavallari when he was serving on your executive board. This legislation would require TNCs to report additional data on their rides to the Commonwealth so that we can better understand how these companies are interacting with our riders in our transportation system. In the Commonwealth, last year there were about 91 million TNC rides. 45 million of those rides, half of those rides, took place in Boston. In Boston, more than 100,000 trips start in our city every single day, dealing with TNC. So it's important that we're able to kind of drill down into the data and the micro data to see where those trips are happening. Currently, the TNC companies are required to report to us data and where a trip starts, what city or municipality a trip starts in, and where it ends. But for the 100,000 trips that start in Boston, we don't know if those are starting or ending in downtown, although we can assume that, or out on some of the outskirts or more distant neighborhoods from downtown. So with this legislation and the good work of Chairman Michlewitz, we'll be able to drill down into some of that data. Beyond roads and rails, we included in the bond bill some substantial funding, more than $50 million to our Complete Streets program, which should improve the experiences for bicyclists and pedestrians on our roadway, as well as $30 million for grants as they pertain to ferry and water service, something that had been getting going prior to COVID, and we hope to see we'll be able to utilize our waterways better in a way to deal with congestion holistically in this Commonwealth. I do want to talk about another piece of legislation that I was the primary sponsor of this year. I was happy to see it pass the legislature and be signed by the governor about 4 weeks ago now. This bill criminalized the really barbaric practice of female genital mutilation, also known as FGM. For over 20 years, the practice of female genital mutilation was illegal in the United States through a federal ban. However, in 2018, a federal district court overturned the federal law of 1996, saying that Congress had overstepped their authority in passing the ban on that practice. Now, in the court's decision, they agreed that the practice of female genital mutilation and cutting was a despicable practice and really amounted to criminal assault. They just felt that the federal Congress, I should say, overstepped their boundaries, and it should be an issue better left to the states. Since 2018, more than 30 states have passed a law, and I was happy to be the primary sponsor this year in ensuring that we are, affirming the Commonwealth's commitment to protecting the health and safety of women and girls in the Commonwealth by banning female genital mutilation. So I want to thank the people who helped with that legislation. I know Ellen Hume, was an advocate. So just thank you all for your help on this. Also, this year, the legislature passed what's known as in the Senate anyway, called the Reform, Shift, and Build Act, and it's a comprehensive racial equity bill that is designed to increase police accountability and shift the roles of law enforcement away from surveillance and punishment to begin the dismantling of systemic racism in this Commonwealth, kind of taking cues from some of the cultural battles that are happening across this country. The Massachusetts legislature decided it understood the high standard of conduct demonstrated by police in Massachusetts. This law also updates to reflect the high standard that most police officers in Massachusetts are conducting themselves under. And these updates would include establishing greater opportunities for training and certification and prohibit racial profiling while you're limiting the use of force, including tear gas, rubber bullets, and chokeholds. So as this bill remains in conference committee, I look forward to see what the result of that is. So that's an update since the last time I spoke to you all. Thank you for your patience and letting me get through it. I know you have a long night tonight, but I'll take any questions.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Senator. We're going to do some on chat because we can figure out how to get you to raise your hand on this Zoom account. So do people have questions? Pop them into the chat. We can try to open up a couple of mics.
As a filler, while we're waiting for a question to come into the chat, can you just restate when the coffee hour is with you next Tuesday, or where it is?
That coffee hour is going to be virtually, and you can sign up. If you give me your contact information tonight, I can make sure that you have the information. But it's going to be next Tuesday, September 29th at 6 p.m. And it'll be virtually. So if you sign up, you will get an email from me with some, contact information on how to log into the Zoom.
That's great.
Obviously, in the world of Zoom bombing and things like that, we want to be very careful as who we're giving the password to. But obviously, any constituent of mine is invited to share their experience and get some information.
That's great. And Luigi put up your email address.
Yeah.
So it's right in the chat if anybody wants the information to get an invite. That would be great. We do have a message from Ellen Hume that says, "We are so grateful to you, Senator Boncore, for your leadership, especially on FGM." So thank you very much. If there are no questions, we will just keep moving because we have a packed agenda tonight.
Can I ask one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, one more thing. I just want to remind everyone, Secretary of State Galvin has sent out applications for anyone who wants to vote by mail. Those applications, I got mine last week and they should be in. You should return those as soon as possible if you're planning to vote by mail. And if you're not planning to vote by mail, you are planning to vote by mail, just make a plan to vote. Make a plan to vote. There's so much at stake in November's election, as we're seeing in the past weeks, months, and really year. It's so important that we exercise that privilege in this country. I just had to add that, and thank you.
So we have a question from Rory Harrington. In regards to the $5 billion deficit, what programs are you looking at cutting and how are you thinking through this?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure Chairman Michlewitz will get more deeper into this as he's dealing with it, every day. The Federal Heroes Act that is currently in Congress, I think the House has passed a version of it and it's over to the Senate, would greatly help reduce this deficit. We are advocating and speaking to our elected officials in Congress and kind of pushing them to, hopefully they will be able to get some money to individual states to deal with some of the deficits. We're not really looking to cut anything. We will see some decreases maybe in line items in our budget. Some discretionary spending may be reduced as a result of facing this budget. We're not looking to cut everything. We're at this point kind of trying to see what we'll have available, from the federal government. But if not, we are going to have to take a look at kind of slimming down some programs.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Another question.
Another question from Karen Foley. Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. So from Antonio Gillespie, with regards to the $30 million being invested into the ferry system, which lines are being invested in and how will that help city congestion?
Yeah, I mean, the Boston Harbor has a pretty robust ferry system compared to the rest of Massachusetts. There are lines that come up from Hingham, a line that comes down from Gloucester. There used to be a line that came down from Lynn to the city that we're hoping to get back up. My major focus is inner harbor ferry service as it pertains to the neighborhoods in and around Boston. There is a substantial congestion problem coming through the Sumner Tunnel from people up 1A and on the North Shore, people in East Boston trying to get into the city. So as to how this will deal with congestion, it will help, people who maybe need to get through the tunnel that may want to stop in East Boston, park their car and get on the ferry. Some of the data transportation data I've seen shows that people are willing to change, to make 2 stops on their trip. So they'll change from the red line to the green line to get to their destination. They'll change from a car to a ferry to get to their destination. But that's sort of where it maxes out. Congestion is a nonlinear equation. Meaning if you can take 2% of cars off the road, you'll help congestion by more than 20%. Our roads have a certain level of capacity, and once they reach that capacity, every extra car on that road adds to an inordinate amount of pressure onto that road. So if we can take a small amount of cars off our roads, those last few that bring us over capacity, we can help with congestion. So I think, any tool in the toolbox that we can access, whether that's red-blue connector to get people from Boston, onto the Red Line into Cambridge, or ferries, if we can, any few amount of people that are willing to get on that boat will help in our roadway congestion.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Next question, Adam, I'm just going to take the first one here. So from Adam Castiglione, Senator Boncore, what are your feelings on the cuts to the T and MBTA services? And also thank you for your leadership in the Senate.
Yeah, obviously no one likes to see cuts due to the fact that the MBTA was severely reduced in the amount of people riding on those services in the last 7 months. Commuter rail numbers were down 90%. The T was down, I think, to about, was down 80%. So on the highest numbers on the blue line, we saw about 18% pre-COVID ridership. So we were losing about 88% of the riders on the blue line. And that was the best line. The red line, the green line, the orange line were down between 8 and 12%. So you can imagine that, the MBTA lost about 90% of their fare generated revenues. The MBTA is looking at about a $300 million deficit for fiscal year 2021. And with people remote learning, but remotely working, they think that the commuter rail in the Commonwealth will be much slower to come back to pre-COVID ridership numbers. So with less ridership, there's less revenue. The T has made substantial efforts to reduce services on lines that have seen the most substantial reduction in riders. So you may see some of the
WCVB.
You
may see some of the commuter rail lines that are less popular have maybe a ride reduced. I don't see it as being a service cut to our core MBTA system at this point, as we expect that those riders will come back. Many essential workers and people who have been using it throughout utilize that service. So I don't see major cuts to that.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
We do have a question about plans from Tavistock, but maybe we could let Chairman Michlewitz start speaking and we could come back to that because I think that's probably going to come up again. So I would like to introduce our state rep, Chairman Aaron Michlewitz.
Thank you, Senator General.
Thank you, Senator Boncore.
Thank you.
Aaron, your mic is open. Text him. Oh, there's a hand. Oh, he's not open now. Okay. I did unmute. Where is he? Do you see him?
You should be able to.
Okay, you're open now.
Let me see. Which one's he on?
It's right here. It's showing open. Not sure what's happening. He's having some technical problems. Not that that's unusual these days. We're all going through that. Okay. Counselor Flynn, would you mind stepping in right now? Could we, I'm going to unmute you. I thought I did. Nope. Okay. There you go. Chairman Michlewitz fixes his technology problems. Let's welcome Counselor Ed Flynn to NEWRA NEWNC's joint meeting. We're delighted to have you tonight. Take it away.
Thank you, Cheryl and Brett. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And I want to say thank you to the North End Waterfront Residents Association. And if Aaron Michlewitz does get on, I can certainly let him speak ahead of me. That's no problem. I know he has a busy schedule. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you tonight. My name is City Councilor Ed Flynn, and I represent District 2, which includes South Boston, the South End, Chinatown, and most of downtown Boston. I share the downtown Boston area with Lydia Edwards, and Kenzie Block has a little piece of the downtown area as well. But it's great to work with Lydia. I know she's going to be on the call in a bit, but I just also wanted to highlight the tremendous cooperation and working relationship we have with Senator Boncore and with Aaron Michlewitz, Chairman Michlewitz, on so many issues. Joe was highlighting the funding for transportation infrastructure. That's critical work him and Representative Michlewitz are doing. So I just wanted to say thank you to both of them. We're lucky to have strong partners at the state that are committed to so many issues. During this pandemic, we certainly had many significant challenges throughout our city. In my district, especially, representing a large immigrant community. I also represent the largest number of residents living in public housing of any district city councilor. So over the last 6 and 7 months, the number one issue I probably have focused on is food access to our seniors and persons with disabilities as well, and getting them the supplies, the masks that they desperately need. Food access has been a critical issue for so many families in the city and in this area as well. As I know, this neighborhood in the North End has really stepped up and supported so many people in need as well. So I want to thank the North End and the Waterfront community for their generosity. We went back to school, Boston Public Schools, yesterday. Our son is a student in the public school system. He started yesterday. So far, it seems like the remote process is working, but we'll get more information. And I think we're having a conference call with the superintendent sometime next week to discuss the first week of school opening and any challenges. As I mentioned, the issues I focused on were quality of life, neighborhood issues. Just as an example, today I had a hearing. I chair city and neighborhood services for the city council. I sponsored a hearing with City Councilor Braden out of Alston and Brighton. And we had a hearing specifically on pest control and illegal dumping that we're seeing through many parts of the city, including the downtown area as well. But the number of calls I received on, pest control in various neighborhoods is probably the biggest number of complaints I've received over the last year. And it's every neighborhood. And working closely with inspectional services and public works, we're going to have a more aggressive approach going forward on this issue, not only illegal dumping, but pest control, including more baiting, more fines for people that do illegal dumping. And it's a critical public health issue that's having a devastating impact. If you see any issues that are of concern to you, please put it into 311 system, and that will generate a request from City Hall to the appropriate city agency. It'll go directly to the person that oversees pest control or illegal dumping for the city, just as an example. Homelessness, addiction, and recovery. As I mentioned, I represent the South End as well. And I represent the area close to Mass Ave and Albany Street, Southampton. So that what happens in Mass Ave and Albany Street certainly has an impact on almost every neighborhood across the city, whether it's needle pickup, whether it's getting people into drug treatment programs or housing related issues. Prior to starting as a city councilor, I was a probation officer for 10 years at Suffolk Superior Court, and I supervised the homeless community that was on probation. And if I had 80 people at a time on probation at Suffolk Superior Court, about 60 of them have committed their offense outside of Suffolk County. And so I bring that up to say that, you know, I think we need to work closer with the court system on this issue. And I'm advocating that if you commit an offense in a particular county, whether it's Franklin or Middlesex or Essex, Worcester County, that you should complete that probation period. You should complete that parole period in that respective county. I just don't think Boston is able to continuing to provide critical services to anyone that comes into our city looking for treatment and looking for services. We are compassionate people. I just don't think the city can sustain that effort any longer. It's having a devastating impact in the South End. It's moving closer here. Obviously, it's having a devastating impact in downtown Boston, which I also represent. The other issue that I thought might be of interest to you, I'm also having a hearing, I believe it's in the next couple of weeks, on our infrastructure with water and sewer issues. So I'm asking the Water and Sewer Department to do an inventory on how our pipes look below ground. What are the likelihood that there's a possibility of them, us having short-term problems and long-term problems. We've had many of these pipes have burst over the years, and when it does burst, it has a huge impact on the neighborhood. That will go into my committee on city and neighborhood services. And we had one in the South End. It practically shut down. This was a week before COVID. It practically shut down a neighborhood for almost a month. So the infrastructure improvements need to be made in our city. We're an old city, and I think there's more we can do on water and sewer related issues. And then finally, the other issue that I thought you might find interesting is we only have another week left on the city census. And I've been working especially close with Aaron Michlewitz and Mayor Walsh, making sure that everybody is counted, everybody signs up, completes the census. It determines the federal funding we receive from the federal government to our state, to our city, so we're able to provide services for those in need, but also for public education, infrastructure improvements. It determines the number of congressional representatives as well we have in Washington. So that's only another, I believe, 10 days left to complete it, but it's critical if you haven't done it. Just want to encourage everybody to make an effort to do it. And finally, the last point I want to make is I really focus on nuts and bolts of city government, quality of life issues. If you have anything, I have a great relationship with the Wharf District Council, But if you have anything that you specifically need me to focus on, please let me know. Send me an email. I get back to you right away. And constituent services is still the #1 job of a district city councilor. And I'm proud of the job that we're doing. I'm also proud of the work Councilor Edwards is doing as well. I know she'll be joining later. But having said that, just want to say thank you for the association for inviting me. And I also want to say thank you to Joe and to Aaron for being great partners over the last several years.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We do have some questions for you, and I've got to open up Damien's mic. Damien, stand by. I just hit unmute. You should be open.
Hey, how you doing, Mr. Flynn?
Hey, Damien.
So I am both a restaurant owner and a resident in the North End for quite some time. I just have a question. And the question is, why doesn't the city ever reconsider pickup times on the garbage? We're talking about pests and stuff. And I mean, I'm probably one of the biggest callers to 311. I actually have the app, and I never report anonymous. I always want people to know that, you know, I'm watching their garbage, which kind of stinks because I'm not getting paid to do it, but I love the North End. And anyway, my point being, why aren't pickup times changed? It's a feast for the rats. Garbage, some people throw out their garbage, and this is mostly residential. I have to say, most restaurants get picked up every night, and most restaurants have sealed containers. And you know, a lot of us power wash, we do our part. And for me, coming from my position, I don't know how it works in the city's position. For me, it just seems so logical to change pickup times so that there is garbage on the food, garbage on the streets for less time as possible, you know? And like the restaurants, we get picked up by 2, 3 in the morning. Most of us take our garbage out by 11-ish. I know there's issues with the elderly and stuff like that. And there's also a big problem. Like me, I would do anything I could. Tell me where, assign me a building and I will take out the elderly's trash those 2 days a week with pleasure, I might add. Having said that, a lot of absentee landlords really don't talk to their tenants. So you have people throwing out garbage, not just in garbage bags. They're throwing stuff in the street that's loose. And then you just mentioned the homeless problem. It's hard to have sympathy for a lot of the homeless people in this neighborhood because we had a guy today throw a match, and this guy's been walking around harassing people. He threw a match in one of the recyclable containers in front of Umberto's. This happened at about 5 o'clock. I mean, the police came right down, which was great. He got away. But it seems like garbage is causing problems in many different areas. And, you know, absentee landlords, maybe the fines aren't big enough for them. Maybe they should be fined a lot more than they're getting fined. And maybe that we can, and I promise I'm going to stop in 1 second, and maybe we can limit the time. Maybe the garbage either has to go out like, you know, after a certain time or before a certain time early in the morning. I mean, we can't, you know, I know we can't please everyone, but this to me seems like it would help a little bit. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Damien. I appreciate the comments. That's exactly what we were talking about today. If I wouldn't want to make a recommendation on the restaurants in the North End because I don't represent it, but I know Lydia obviously does. So I will speak to her and relay that information. But generally speaking, you know, we have to do more of a public awareness campaign to residents about how you take out trash. It seems kind of ridiculous to say it, but there is a way that you can reduce trash on the ground, reduce rats. And just as an example, in the South End, we've had a pilot program where we had certain barrels that were made, almost covers over barrels that make it almost impossible, make it very difficult for rats or mice to get through. So that was a pilot we did in the South End. It worked well. But just encouraging people to take their trash out, obviously as late as possible before the truck arrives. But there's a whole list of steps residents can take to prevent some of these issues. In the City of Boston Public Works and Inspectional Services agreed to write up recommendations on exactly how to take out your trash. And that's something they said they would get to us over the next 30 days. And once we do have that, I'll make sure we send it over to the organization and to Councilor Edwards and others as well. But I agree with the points that you made. I also wanted to highlight that Councilor Anissa Rasabi-George is on this call as well, and she was very active on today's meeting. I hope that answers your question, Damien.
Okay, we have one more question for you.
Okay.
From Joanne Hayes-Rhines. Is there any plan to police the bicyclists? Some drive down the streets the wrong way, others fly through the red lights. It's very few who obey the traffic laws. And with more bike lanes, this will only get worse.
That is a challenge that we have to deal with. I'll make sure I relay those concerns to the new police captain, but those issues are critical. You know, the lanes, the roads belong to everybody, and it's critical that pedestrian safety is the #1 issue for us. That's an issue I've focused on since I arrived. I think the speed limit at 25 miles an hour is too fast on our streets in Boston. I'd like to see it. I've advocated for a reduction to at least 20 miles an hour. But having said that, I'm also in favor and continue to advocate for a dedicated group of police officers that just do enforcement issues, whether it's speeding, whether it's people taking turns on that they shouldn't be, following the rules of the road. But pedestrian safety is a critical issue. Very difficult for our seniors, for persons with disabilities to, once you're in the crosswalk, to cross the street, because a car could be driving towards you at 25 miles an hour, and very difficult to stop distracted drivers as well. So I will make sure I pass that issue along to the new police captain, who's done a good job so far, being visible, accountable. And I think of the waterfront area. I think of the downtown area, the North End area, in the Wharf District as a neighborhood. And you're entitled to your fair share of basic city services, regardless of the location of where you live. But you want what everyone else wants in West Roxbury, Hyde Park: clean streets, safe streets, good parks. And that's something I'm going to continue to focus on. So again, please keep me posted if there's anything I can do to be helpful. I have an open door policy. Email is the best way to reach me. I'll get back to you right away.
Can you put your email up in the chat, Councilor Flynn? That would be great. A couple people have asked for it.
Yes, I'll definitely do that. And
that's great.
You know, I'm also going to stay on for the next hour, and I'll listen to some of the concerns from others as well.
Terrific, because now we're going to introduce Chairman Michlewitz.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn.
And your mic should be open.
Is that working now?
You are working. You're in.
Good. My apologies that the other computer that we had, the microphone was not working for some reason. So I appreciate Senator holding the fort earlier, and I appreciate Councilor Flynn carrying the torch over the last couple minutes here. And both of them are doing great work, and same with the Councilor Rasabi-George, who I know is here, along with Councilor Edwards and the mayor. You know, we have a good team here representing the North End, but also representing other parts of the city, and doing our best to, you know, to deal with what is a unprecedented set of circumstances that were put before us with coronavirus taking place in March. And, you know, the thing I think, while everything has been very challenging for a lot of folks, I think, you know, I like to keep in perspective the idea that there's no playbook for any of us elected officials to go to how to deal with what we have dealt with over the last 6 months. You know, this hasn't been something that we can point to of successes and failures in the past, because this is such circumstances and situations that we've never experienced. And I think there has been a lot of hard work that's taken place by a lot of my colleagues some successes, maybe some not as successful in relation to initiatives and things that they've been working on. But I think we've all tried to learn and work as hard as we can to try to make this us get through this difficult and extremely difficult circumstances that we've been dealing with. Amongst many other issues that have been confronted with us. I appreciate the time, Cheryl and Brett, and thank you for putting this together once again. I am trying to make a point to try to get to a lot of my neighborhood associations over the next month or so in my district. And luckily, the North End Waterfront Neighborhood Council and the North End Waterfront Residents Association have the same jurisdiction, so we can do something very convenient and have a meeting together here. And I guess I'm going to start with the state budget. There's a whole host of things that we can talk about. I know Joe was tackling a number of those discussions, but I'll start with the state budget because of the role that I've been given related to the House Ways and Means Committee as the chair and writing the state budget. And it was a lot of fun in 2019 when I got appointed to it, back when you had $1 billion surplus and everything was the economy was chugging along and things were great. 2020 has been a little bit more difficult related to the job and trying to make sure our budget is balanced. And the truth of it is that we haven't even done a full formal FY21 fiscal budget because we've decided to do temporary budgets for the first couple months of this fiscal year. And the reason why we did that is because literally in March, when the coronavirus really started hitting, was really the time that the House Ways and Means Committee was writing the state budget, our first draft of it. Typically, the House does the budget in April. The Senate will do the budget in May. We will come to a conference committee and work together to get an agreement by July 1st to send it to the governor for the fiscal year. And obviously, with coronavirus hitting in March and a lot of unknowns and the economy being slowed down. And I emphasize the idea, and I think I've done this before with this group, that this is the first time in modern history that the economy was slowed down by government intentionally, with the idea because of the spread of the public health concerns related to the spread of the virus. Every other slowdown of the economy has been for outside reasons, whether it be the bond market might have busted, the real estate market might have busted like it did in 08 and 09. We might have been at war, which might have, obviously made things very difficult. Well, this was a circumstance where we actually purposely had to slow down the economy, whether it's city, state, federal officials as a whole. And how we reemerged from that slowdown is still a very, very unanswered question at this point in time. So we decided to do some temporary budgets with the hope of doing a full year fiscal 21 budget before the end of the calendar year. And we did this for two reasons. One, like I was saying, how we reemerged from the original shutdown of the economy was anybody's guess because we've never had experienced anything like that. And how our revenue sources were going to reemerge and build back up was really anybody's guess. We heard from a number of economists on this who had different theories, but I'll be honest with you, I think a lot of people were really guessing in relation to exactly what it was going to mean and what damage was actually going to be, where we're going to have to recover from. The second thing was the hope that we would get some potential federal funding in terms of federal assistance from Congress and from the president. And as we stand here in September, as many of you have probably paid attention to, it doesn't look like at the immediate moment we're going to see any federal assistance coming from Congress. They have not been able to come to an agreement. The House passed, as Joe was just mentioning, the House passed a significant package back in late May, maybe early June, that would have sufficiently given us the revenue, additional resources to offset our revenue shortfalls. In fairness, we have to pass a balanced budget. We do not quote unquote print money like the federal government does. We have to pass a balanced budget by law every year. And the federal government can go into deficit. They've obviously been doing that for quite some time, over generations. I think they're over $1 trillion in deficit. And, the idea that while, in Massachusetts, we put into the economy a lot more than we basically take out in terms of revenue, in terms of numbers, whether that's income tax or any other types of sales tax or anything that we generate money from. We put a lot more into the economy compared to other states than a lot of other states do. And unfortunately, that's not the, when the time's coming now for us to be able to get some assistance as we're dealing with this challenge, we're not seeing that assistance coming from the federal government. So we're going to have to live with the idea in the near future of trying to build a budget with a huge deficit. And when I say a huge deficit, it is somewhere in the range, I think Joe said this as well, it's somewhere in the range of $5 to $6 billion. And there is only so much in terms of how we can get out of that. When you're talking about a $5 to $6 billion budget, you're talking, our budget is about $43 billion. But when you take a lot of the off-budget discussions like Mass Health or Chapter 90 to repair roads and bridges, and you're talking about discretionary spending that's not already by law allocated ahead of time, you're talking about $29 to $30 billion. So in essence, you're looking at about a 20% cut to our budget if we did strictly a cut. Now that's one of the choices we have. We have three different types of options in terms of getting through this shortfall. The first is cuts, and we could do drastic cuts, and that would mean drastic cuts to services like homeless shelters, initiatives that rely on state funding, like opioid addiction services that rely on state funding, like our parks that rely on state funding, like our local municipalities that rely on state funding, our local education systems. These are all things that we have to, would be drastically impacted if we ended up cutting the entire $5 billion. The other alternative is to go to the rainy day fund. And we have built up over the last couple of years in particular, one of the largest rainy day funds in the country in comparison to what our size of our budget is, to the tune of $3.5 billion. And but the challenge is you can't just drain from the rainy day fund all in 1 year because traditionally when we've seen revenue shortfalls over the last, modern history, it's taken a couple of years for us to build back that revenue to the point where we don't have to make any cuts. And this is a 2 or 3 year issue, at least, if not maybe 4 or 5 years, of us having to manage this fiscal issue that we're facing. And by draining our rainy day fund all in 1 year, we would leave ourselves in real peril for FY22 or FY23 or beyond. So it's very difficult for us to do that. The last and probably the most difficult and the least alternative that we want to do is to raise revenue to balance our budget. And that is something that everything is on the table. So you have to make sure you have to consider everything put in place. The House did pass a transportation revenue package back in March. This was pre-COVID to the tune of about $600 million, which raised money off of corporate minimums, the minimum that corporations pay into the system, off the gas tax, which would raise the gas tax a couple cents, which hasn't been raised, has only been raised 3 cents in the last 35 years, and a whole host of other initiatives. One of the proposals was raising money off of Uber and Lyft fees and adding fees, which we have one of the lowest in the country. So, if we have to get to a revenue conversation, those are alternatives that we talked about, but I think, that would have to be a whole host of discussions before we decided to go in that route. And we're not there at this moment, to be honest with you. So that's the budget concerns at the moment. The hope is that we do something in the next couple of weeks, if not next couple of months. We are having an economic roundtable that will be broadcast live on October 7th. The House Ways and Means Committee, the Senate Ways and Means Committee, and the Administration and Finance Department of the Governor's Office. We're hosting a joint meeting where we'll have economists come in and talk about exactly where we are as a state in relation to revenue and where we hope to be. So I welcome you that. I'm going to forward that link to when we finalize that link. I'm going to forward it probably to Matt Conti and to probably both Brett and Cheryl to make sure if anybody wants to watch it, by all means, it'll be October 7th, I believe, sometime around 11 o'clock. So that's the state. That's the essence of the state budget. I'm happy to offer up questions or listen to questions on that. But I did want to just touch upon a couple things. I think Joe did talk about the police reform a little bit, but I do want to mention it. The House and the Senate are currently in negotiations for a final police reform bill. We both passed a significant package that the moment called for. I mean, I think that there is there are some pieces in here that probably could have been done before you ever heard the name of George Floyd or even before the discussion of Black Lives Matter took place. But we have a strong police union here in Massachusetts, and they many times have thwarted some of people's efforts. And the Black Latino Caucus in particular was focused on creating a new board of standardized training and certification for police officers in Massachusetts. And it's important to understand because we are one of the only states in the country that doesn't have a unified board that unifies the standards across the state. And when I say across the state, I don't just mean BPD. We have great officers at BPD. I have a great working relationship with the folks at Area A1. And the new captain has come in, and I actually went over and visited with him about 2 weeks ago, and we sat for about 2 hours and talked about different issues in the neighborhood and different issues related to the legislation. And I think he's going to take the ball and carry it just like Captain Fong did for so long here. And so when I say about the standards, BPD is not necessarily the ones we're talking about, but it's about creating a baseline of standards across the Commonwealth so that BPD has a similar set of standards that Springfield Police does, that Bourne Police down the Cape do. And it's not just the municipalities, it's also places like the MBTA, because they have a police force, like the UMass Amherst, because they have a police force, like Massport, they have their own police force. And there is no standardized training, there is no standardized set of circumstances for police officers across the Commonwealth to make sure that we are setting the highest standards we possibly can for our police officers in every neck of the Commonwealth. And the police reform bill does create a board that will certify police officers and decertify police officers if they do things that are not up to code. And a lot of those are, I can show you the legislation, I'll forward it to you, but there are a lot of things that are pretty simple, in terms of how they should operate and how they should conduct business. We also had things in there that related to restrictions on usage of force, placing bans on limiting chokeholds and limiting discharging firearms into a fleeing vehicle, and they're restricting the use of tear gas, rubber pellets, and dogs. These are all things that have been talked about. The chokeholds is one particular thing that is being discussed on a federal level, not just on the state level. And it is, the unfortunate way that George Floyd was killed was through the use of a chokehold. We also ban no-knock warrants if children or elderly are believed to be in the premises. And we also had a discussion about qualified immunity, which was a very heated and contentious discussion. And I will say this, that the entire bill itself was one of the most contentious issues that I've ever dealt with in my 10 plus years here as your legislator on the House side. And, the vote was actually 93 to 66, which doesn't sound that close, but when you think about 14 votes that flip one way to the other, that's pretty quickly, it could have pretty easily went the other way. And on the qualified immunity, we had some disagreements with the Senate, but we tried to find a way to build a system that protected the good cops and allowed them to keep their qualified immunity, but also made sure that the cops that were doing things that are not up to code and that are not sufficient in terms of what we would believe to be good policing, they would then lose their qualified immunity for the issues that if they were decertified, and if they were therefore if they were decertified, and if they were losing their qualified immunity for the issue that they were decertified for. Excuse me, I just wanted to make that clear. So that was the police reform bill. We also did a climate change bill, which the Senate did as well, that we're working on currently in negotiations to try to get to the governor's desk. And we required the Commonwealth to achieve net zero statewide greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. We also established environmental justice districts, put them in statute, and which would require developers to incorporate environmental and public health impacts into their planning and into the development of any of their projects which would be in environmental justice districts, which is a very important piece for places like downtown, places like that I represent, which have more congestion than anywhere else in the state, or in a lot of places in the country, but in particular in the Commonwealth and in the city of Boston, and also have to deal with that congestion, have to deal with that living with that environment every single day. And Senator Boncore has a lot of those districts as well, and even more so because he has East Boston with Massport and Logan Airport and all the congestion that deals with that. We also incorporated higher energy efficient standards for a variety of common appliances like plumbing, faucets, computers, and commercial appliances. We increased the required total procurement of offshore wind power by an additional 2,000 megawatts. And we are doing our best as a state to try to get off of or to get to as much clean energy as we possibly can get to. And offshore wind has been our kind of the one thing that we've really focused on over the last 6 to 7 years, because we've been told by many folks that are much more smarter than me in this issue that we are quote unquote the Saudi Arabia of wind. In essence, we're really like New England and maybe the Long Island Sound produces more wind than anywhere else in the country, and we can really produce a lot more clean energy by taking advantage of that offshore wind. Unfortunately, the federal government, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years, has thwarted a lot of our efforts in terms of the development of that. In particular, certain projects that are literally ready, shovel ready to try to get in the ground that the federal government has not given the approval to. So we did a number of things of that, and then also we adopted several measures at improving gas pipeline safety, including increasing fines for safety violations and expediting timelines for repairing gas leaks. And that is obviously something that many of us know about and see every day as we living in downtown. The amount of gas leaks that we have in downtown in particular are alarming and concerning. And I think to try to produce as much of a safety precautions as we can, we took some steps in this legislation. We also did a major economic development bill, which is also being negotiated with the Senate currently right now. On the House side, we did add a restaurant relief, distressed restaurant relief component to the economic development bill, and we did it through by legalizing sports betting, and by taking a portion of that revenue that we would get from sports betting, which we would believed to be about $20 million a year, and giving it to distressed restaurants. Actually puts real dollars into the restaurant's hands. It doesn't have to be allocated by someone else. It would have to be allocated, but it wouldn't have to be approved by someone else. It would actually be allocated directly to about 1,000 restaurants. We believe it would cover through the $20 million that would be raised through sports betting, and this would allow for restaurants to cover things like their payroll protection discussion, some insurance concerns. The rental assistance, which I know is a huge issue for a number of restaurants here in the North End in particular, rental and mortgage assistance if the mortgage is on site, or if the owner is on site, and also dealing with things like backlogs of supplies and new PPE discussions, which I know there are a number of overhead costs that restaurants are facing that they never had to deal with before. But on the supplies and the backlog of the supplies, I've heard from many restaurants that during those 3 months of the complete shutdown was a lot of them were having to force to deal with paying with suppliers and that discussion. I think this relief will allow them to try to get some legs, out from under them, and basically get some assistance related to that. We also created a tourism destination marketing district, which would allow hotels to create a bid-like system, which we're very familiar with the Greenway bid here, to charge customers up to an extra 2% on the room occupancy tax that would go towards funding local tourism marketing activities that local municipalities would buy into and the hotels themselves would buy into. They would have to approve it by a 55% margin. And the reason why that we focused on that is because there is we're not going to be getting the overseas tourism for quite some time, for a couple of years now, we believe. And the focus is going to really be on local. And when I say local, I mean like within the Northeast, for instance, tourism. And we're going to be competing with the New Yorks of the world and with the Washington, D.C.s and the Philadelphias of the world for tourism dollars over the next couple of years, because those folks from overseas may not be coming, and people from the other side of the country may not be coming. Instead of taking a long journey trip, you may decide to just get in a car and drive a couple hours. And Boston will hopefully be a destination you want to go to, but we want to make sure that we have some additional money and some additional revenue to market the highlights of and obviously the North End is one of the biggest highlights of the city. So that's something that we worked on in this economic development bill. There's a number of housing components in there as well, but I don't want to take up too much time. And there's a number of other pieces of legislation that we worked on, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments. And thank you, Cheryl and Brett, for giving me the opportunity.
Oh, thank you very, very much. So we're going to start off with a question. Kathy had a question that she was posing to Senator Boncore, and we asked her to wait for you. It's for both of you, actually. Kathy, we just opened your mic.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Representative Michlewitz, for all that you do and continue to do to help the North End neighborhood, and also the other elected officials that are on the call are welcome to jump in and help with this issue as well. I live at Commercial Wharf, and Tavistock Development recently presented their potential plans of what they would like to develop at the Joe's Restaurant location and on Commercial Wharf in the burned out building to the unit owners at Commercial Wharf. In my opinion, and a number of other people that I've spoken with, we're very concerned that the development overburdens the property. It includes a hotel, it includes a restaurant, rooftop bar and restaurant, and residential condominiums on the water. And we're concerned about public access to the waterfront. We're concerned about traffic. We're concerned about safety, ability to get emergency vehicles on and off the wharf. The space that they're proposing at the entrance from Commercial Wharf to Atlantic Ave is very congested. And would like to know what can be done to help protect the historic nature of Commercial Wharf and the neighborhood. As you know, that we've had long history with issues with Boston Yacht Haven as well, who is in partnership with Tavistock related to the DEP, and they're creating legal issues with the first floor unit owners at Commercial Wharf and potentially having to lose their right to be able to keep their properties, and proposed legislation. And I know that's multi-pronged and a long question, but it's a very serious question for the neighborhood and what this proposed development might mean for us and how we can help to keep our neighborhood the historic character that it is.
Well, Kathy, thank you for bringing that up, and I appreciate it. And you know, first off, the legislation that I filed that I've been working on is still well alive and well. You know, it is actually in my committee, which in Ways and Means on the House side, which there's a lot of other issues that we're dealing with, but certainly because it's my district, it's first and foremost. I am hopeful for some type of resolution that wouldn't require legislation. I'm hopeful that DEP and the Attorney General's office will come to the table in a fair way, and one that that will produce good results for the residents of Commercial Wharf. I filed that as a placeholder. I will call it, as a way to try to get us in a conversation. I think it's been working to a certain degree, but nothing's done until it's done. And I want to see what the potential results could be from the continued conversations with DEP. I filed it because I want to protect the residents in particular on the first floor there that bought in good faith, thinking that they were buying a thing without the minor, necessarily with the minor modifications ever going away. This is something that I'm very disappointed in that we're in this at this point and in this process, because it shouldn't be this way. You make these modifications from DEP standpoint, from EOEA standpoint. They should live by them, so I'm not going to stop fighting for the residents of Commercial Wharf on this issue. If I have to if I have to keep pushing the legislation, I will. But I'm hopeful that it wouldn't take legislation, because there are some advocacy groups that are against the legislation because of the idea of it creating quote unquote precedent. And I think that my opinion of that is that DEP created the precedent a long time ago. And therefore, it doesn't matter what future precedents we're creating with that. As for the development, I have actually never seen the development, it's hard for me to comment on it, but I obviously take what my constituents would say as pretty important in this conversation, and I know the senator would agree with me, and the councilor would agree with me on that. So, until I see it, I don't want to give a full idea of it. I mean, I haven't seen it, so I can't comment. I know Patrick in my office was participated in some meetings. I can't remember which was the most recent one, but you know that at the end of the day, we're going to have to work with the community to make sure if they're going to move forward with the development project, it's got to be beneficial to the community as well.
Thank you.
Stand by, Damien. We're just trying to open your mic. I'm sorry, Senator Boncore, do you want to respond or?
I think the rep summed it up. I mean, if on the first piece, if the legislation is necessary to move forward with, obviously we'd be waiting for it in the Senate after it moves out of Ways and Means and for a vote. And secondarily, I haven't received any of the plans or seen any plans, although me and my staff will be on the lookout, and obviously we'll be in further discussions with this community group about whatever's going to happen at that location.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Damien, I opened your mic.
Hi, Aaron. How you doing tonight?
Good, Damien. How are you?
Good, thanks. So, I mean, I have a lot more to say, but I don't. I'm going to probably ask Lydia a few things, but I want to ask you because you did make a statement that everything was on the table as far as tax revenue, right? Because you guys are hurting. We're all hurting, right? And the state's hurting for taxes. You have a big deficit now that you didn't have. I was in the Zoom meeting, North End businesses the other day, and right off the bat, the first thing they said was there's no way there's going to be tents outside so that people can have dining outside. And I just have a quick question because it's getting late, but that's 7%. Aaron, you've always been an ear for me, and I appreciate it, as has the senator, as has Lydia. We have great people in this city. Having said that, a lot of the smaller restaurants that don't own their properties, if there is no way to contain the heat so that people can sit outside, people will not be sitting outside. It's not going to happen. It's a waste. People that are buying the heaters are just wasting their money and throwing it away. We have tents throughout the city during special events and 3-day events and stuff like that. There's the chemist's evaluation of the tents that are used with Boston Fire. It would be the same tents. There's a way to heat these tents up. There's a way to do this, but everyone has to be willing to compromise. So if the city and if public safety right off the rip says you can't have outdoor seating, a lot of these restaurants that are, when they will open indoors, when they have to, are going to have 12 seats. They're going to be firing half their staff. That's terrible. And if it can be safely done, heating these tents, heating them from the outside in, not having flames or heaters in the tents, which it can be done, by the way, and you know this. And if there's a legitimate proposal, and if the sight lines are even, because the tents are all even and there's no juxtaposition of umbrellas, I really would hope that the city would sit down and listen to us and let us give them a proposal for safely doing this. And this includes, 1010 Mass Ave, the fire chief. With all due respect, there is a resolution because no one is going to sit outside. That's revenue for the city and that's jobs. People, I will have to get rid of half of my staff, and that breaks my heart, okay? This isn't about a money grab. This is about keeping things going. People are counting on us now, the restaurants, as they have been for the last 3 or 4 months for their entertainment, being able to be social, getting out. There's no bars, there's no clubs, there's no games, there's no nothing. There's no need for all these parking spaces. This would be something that should be considered. And honestly, I really think that the city should let us have a sit down with the mayor and with Lydia and with you guys and everyone involved. And let's figure this out so that it works for everyone and that no one gets hurt. A lot of people have already gotten hurt for this. It's winter time. Let's keep this going. Let us help the city. The city helps us. Let's all help each other.
Yeah, no, I appreciate Damien, and you know that we have done we've trying to go as far as we can, like, I mean, in terms of a neighborhood to be open to creating more space for the restaurants, in terms of these difficult times, and I think that I appreciate all the the conversations that you and I have had on this. And I haven't had a full conversation with the city related to the tents per se. I know that was like an issue when the restaurants first opened up back in June, and I know there was some that they had to take down their tents or whatever. But I do hear the concern about sightlines. I think what I saw from what I read was that was a snippet about sightlines being an issue. I mean, can we try to find ways around that and ways to work on that? I don't know the answer on that because that's not in my jurisdiction or my purview. But I will certainly try to be helpful in looking for solutions. To alleviate that, because I know what you're saying and I get it. This is an unprecedented time, and restaurants are hurting, and we need to do whatever we can to be as helpful as we possibly can within reason of safety and a whole number of other things. But I think we can continue those conversations. I'm open to that. You can call me anytime, and if you have different ideas or new ideas. I think just creating that sightline, that trying to get away from that sightline discussion, I think is the biggest challenge at hand. Because I was thinking about it. I was walking down Hanover Street. If there's tents that are blocking cars and people from seeing where they're going, I think it could get dicey. And I haven't talked to anybody from the fire department or public safety, so I'm kind of just winging it in terms of this conversation. And but I'm keeping an open mind to anything that can get us to a better place, because I agree with you. It is going to be very difficult. Even these last couple of days, it's been cold, down to 40 in the 40s. And I've seen the neighborhood, quiet down a lot at night. And even with the outdoor seating, it's not enough. And so there's got to be some, resolution, or, and I'm open to suggestions.
Okay, we have another question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Aaron. So just a quick question about the Harbor Garage proposal. I guess we can just address this to Senator Boncore as well, and Councilor Flynn. But just concerns about like the climate resiliency plan coming out in October from the city, or like in the middle of October, with the comment period coming out in, deadline is October 2nd. But I just wanted to see just like thoughts and everything like that on that proposal, and if it's something that you think that might have an impact with the climate resiliency plan coming forward. Or how that's going to impact like the waterfront from Chapter 91 while we're on it.
Yeah, I'm going to be candid here, and I'm going to say that I went to that meeting back in March. I think it was a week before everything went crazy, and it was in the Marriott. So I think we were all like freaking out after Biogen had taken place in the Marriott around the same time. I went to that packed room, and that was the first time I've ever seen the proposal. And I really didn't even get a full vetting of it, because it was everything on a couple of slides. And I think a lot of the community members were seeing it for the first time. I don't think that this has been I mean, granted, we've had COVID in the middle of everything. I'd like to see a better community process taking place right now with this project, and that includes the climate resiliency discussion. And first and foremost, because of the impacts that it will have. I know that we had a discussion through the harbor plan, but I think that we need to be a little more aggressive in terms of making sure the community has a voice on this project. And when I say the community, I don't just mean the folks at Harbor Towers, which are certainly a huge component of this discussion, but also other parts around the city and the North End as a whole.
Okay, we opened Councilor Flynn and Senator Boncore's mics if you want to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think, with city planning going with Boston 2040-50 and other planning proposals, like all projects along the waterfront are going to have to be built with coastal resiliency in mind. This project is no exception to that rule. I know we were in the beginning stages of starting to see real plans and proposals when COVID hit. So looking forward, when we do have more of an opportunity to vet it again, we will be hearing from the entire community on what they would like to see here. Coastal resiliency water access for the public, and other concerns are all things that need to be discussed fully. I know this has been going on for a long time, but I think the process is really beginning to engage now that something's been filed. So we'll continue to have these discussions.
Terrific. Okay, Joanne Hayes Rhines, stand by. We're going to open your
Actually,
mic.
you want to see if
Oh, I'm
Councilor
sorry.
Flynn, do you have anything that you wanted to add at all? If
I
you're
opened your mic.
No, I just would echo what Aaron and Joe said, that the community voice is critical during this process, and I still think there's more work that needs to be done to engage the residents, engage the community, making sure that we have a climate resiliency plan, access to the ocean, other issues as well, but there's still more work to be done, as both Joe and Aaron mentioned.
Thank you.
Okay, Joanne, you're open.
Thank you. Aaron, I appreciate, and Ed and Joe, I appreciate your comments about needing more community input, but the comment period ends in about 2 weeks. So nothing can be done in that amount of time. And I agree, Aaron, when you see the presentation, it's a lot of slides that go by and a tremendous amount of information. And I've been asking direct questions about the amount of traffic, the number of cars that are planned to enter and exit, enter the garage from Atlantic Avenue and then exit onto Atlantic Avenue is outstanding. It's hundreds and hundreds of cars. I think it's 300 and some in the peak hour in the morning. 300 cars in an hour. That's just 1 hour. But how do we can make our comments, but how do you get people really engaged when this is being pushed through?
I mean, I sympathize, Joanne, and listen, when I say the community process, you were part of the Harbor Garage. Not the Harbor Garage. I mean the Harbor Plan.
NHP,
right. And I think a lot of people felt unsatisfied from that discussion. I do think maybe an extension on the comment period would be sufficient here, based off of how we've what we're dealing with. And like I just told you, I haven't even seen the project. So I mean, to be perfectly candid, Don Chappell's called me, and I just keep saying, well, let me see the project first. Walk me through the project before we have a real conversation. Until that happens, I really can't, give you a fair assessment of it. But I think that speaks to where this is related to how this has been developed within the community itself. I think that speaks to it. I mean, I'm just one person, but I think that shows you exactly where where the pipelines need to be better. And I get it that this is a difficult time, in terms of trying to get communication together with folks. But this is a massive project, a massive project, the biggest project any of us have seen in this area in a long time. And in my political lifetime, and all the other elected officials here, political lifetime. So this is, this is going to have massive impacts in a lot of factors to this area, and I think it needs more time for more community involvement.
To you and Joe, is it normal that neither one of you have seen the plans for this project? As you say, it is massive. Is that normal that you get to this stage and you haven't seen it?
I would say that's not normal, but I would say this has been the way that this has been going for the last 10 years. So.
Wow, that's scary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Up next, City Councilor Anissa Asabi George. Anissa, are you still here? Yes, you are. Oh, I gotta open your mic. Hold on.
Well, thanks for unmuting me. I know that Councilor Edwards has come in as well during this time, so I certainly am happy to defer to your district councilor before I speak, but just want to say hello to everybody. Happy to be here. Try to get here as often as possible. Karen Foley, who is on here, Karen Wave, usually represents me at these meetings. So we talk a lot about you and very fondly about you. Just want to talk a little bit about my work. Many of you know I'm an at-large city councilor and happy to work with Ed and Lydia on and support them in the work that they're doing in the North End, and certainly Aaron and Joe as well. few things that I'm focused on the city council as chair of the education committee. We've been doing a lot of work around reopening of school and supporting kids through this virtual period and trying to create safe environments for them to get back into school soon. In about 2 weeks, October 1st, our highest need students will start going back to school in a hybrid way. They'll be able to opt into in-person instruction. And then 2 weeks after that, we'll start with our babies and then work our way up to our high schoolers, which I have 4 of them, which will have an option to opt into in-person in a hybrid way the middle of November. And that's obviously if everything goes well and we're able to manage the numbers of the COVID-19 spread and all of that. So we're focused on that. We're also doing this Friday Lunch and Learn series at noon on Fridays. It's a Facebook Live event, conversation about different topics around schools. The first one was food distribution. As you probably know, that although they're schools and they're academic institutions and a lot of our work is focused on curriculum, really many of our kids depend on the school day to have nutrition, to get their food. So food distribution since March has been a big effort that the city and the district have undertaken. We now have 21 super sites across the district in which kids can go in and get 10 meals, 5 days worth of breakfast and lunch to take home, prepackaged meals. And as schools start to reopen, they'll start getting food to go home with them at the end of their 2-day rotation in that hybrid model. We also had a conversation this past week around mental health issues and working with school support services and behavioral health specialists to support our kids. Again, the kids haven't been in school in 6 months. A lot of our children receive services during the school day and require some mental health and emotional health and behavioral health interventions in order to have productive school days. If you have a student or a child that requires special education services, our school psychologists do a lot of those evaluations. So that work needs to continue, certainly for the welfare and the benefit of our children across the district. And the district has made some real accommodations to be able to continue providing those services through telemedicine and through, using technology, whether it's cell phones or laptops and, Zoom communication, to work with kids and work with families to provide those services. This week we'll feature Brian Marks, who's working with some of our most vulnerable youth. We have 5,000 students in the Boston Public Schools experiencing homelessness. They, to me, need some additional TLC, especially during this time, kids that are either doubled up, living in the shelter system across the region. So we're focused on that this week. And then next week, you've probably read lots of reports around some of the challenges we've had distributing Chromebooks to our students so that they can access their education. I've got my 4 boys are in high school in Boston, and we had a laptop die the other day. And so, they also have their own cell phone, so he's able to tune in that way. But we need to make sure that our kids can access their classroom and get the Chromebooks into their hands. We continue to work on that. We'll focus on that discussion publicly next week, but the district continues to work on that every single day. I think Representative Michlewitz and Councilor Flynn both, I think, mentioned some of the challenges around homeless individuals in our city, those that are unsheltered, often dealing with substance use disorders, also dealing with some mental health issues. We're really hyper-focused on that in the Mass and Cass area. But without a doubt, we have seen significant impacts and significant increases in all of our neighborhoods across the city. And as it grows in the downtown crossing area, we're seeing an increase in the number of individuals who are in the North End and along the Greenway. Certainly even into East Boston and some of the outskirts of our other sort of outside neighborhoods across our city. That continues to be a huge focus of mine in making sure that we're working to create those shelter opportunities. Right now, we're looking for 300 to 400 additional beds across our city and across our region for winter months. I had my sweater on because it's freezing in here and I refuse to turn on the heat. But we know that our residents who are unsheltered, our homeless residents, need a place to stay in the wintertime, and many of them will come off the street, but we are short about 300 to 400 beds, again, across the city. So looking to get to that sooner rather than later. And as Aaron mentioned, we rely on the state for almost all of that funding to support the needs of those residents. So I'm going to stop there because I just shared a lot, but happy to take questions and also happy to just listen to the rest of the conversation. As I mentioned, Karen, who's usually here, does fill me in on the topics of the day. We're not familiar with what's happening at Commercial Wharf either. So we'll make sure that to follow up with both Councilor Edwards and Councilor Flynn, as well as Aaron and Joe on that topic to be supportive. That's it for me, Cheryl.
Thank you very much. Brett, you said you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councilor. So first of all, so everyone's just aware, the mayor is not going to be attending tonight's meeting. Something came up last minute. I will open it up to John Romano, our liaison, and Rich McGinnis to answer any questions that you might have had for the mayor just right now. So we'll open up John Romano's mic so he can just explain the situation just real quick.
Okay. You want to do that first?
Yeah, and just another thing, while we're talking about COVID and everything, I do want to acknowledge that James Louisi from New Health is in tonight's meeting. James, if you want to introduce yourself, or if we could just open him up real quick before we get to John.
Sure, James. Hold on.
So you can just pass along contact information if you have any questions about COVID or COVID testing or anything like that in the North End.
Okay, we opened your mic, Jim.
Oh, okay. Yes, so we just moved our testing site from the Nazaro Center to right behind the health center. So any North End resident or someone who lives in the North End is welcome to call for an appointment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. If you can put your contact information or contact information for New Health into the chat, so residents have it, and they're very well informed about it.
Great. Will do. Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it. So John Romano, are you on? Are you mic open?
Yeah, do that question. While I open the mic, so you can read that.
Okay. So just addressing a question in the chat right here, is the electeds, can you all speak to the topic of excuse me, please speak to the topic of when all of our elected representatives will begin getting better educated and involved on development projects in the North End community.
I'll kick it off because I was the last to speak. Karen and I do a regular check-in. Karen attends these meetings on our office's behalf. And then we always connect with the district counselor, and this case, Councilor Flynn or Councilor Edwards, on those subject matters. And that's how we do it. As an at-large counselor, we don't always get into the weeds. We try to, as much as possible, play more of a supporting role in the work because you do have a district counselor and we are at large and do focus on the whole city.
So I guess I would just say that, yeah, we are very on top of the development discussions. I mean, it's usually a city process that we keep an eye on, but in terms of the conversations, we are very well on top of it. Typically, it's I would say that the Harbor Garage piece is an anomaly. The Commercial Wharf piece is really just getting started. They've only had a brief showing. They haven't showed the community. They just kind of showed the abutters, I think. If correct me if I'm wrong, Cheryl. But that initial discussion was more with just the abutters than it was with the overall community itself. I think they have challenges with the abutters. I think they have challenges with the overall community. But in terms of the Harbor Garage thing, my point was I'm trying to make the point that I'm very disappointed in the process. Period. And I think that is something that needs to be rectified and needs and therefore needs more time related to this because I don't think I'm the only one that hasn't seen this proposal.
But I can add, when I make a decision or prior to making a decision on where I stand on a development project, if it's scheduled at the ZBA or at the BPDA, I almost always, regarding this area, I almost always check in with the respective neighborhood association, whether it's the Wharf District Council. I probably have reached out to them on almost every development position coming up at the ZBA or at the BPDA, asking what their position is on a particular issue. And most of the time, I've probably supported the position of the residents.
Okay, sorry. Counselor Edwards, we opened your mic.
I didn't know if you wanted me to talk.
Yes.
Me to just answer the question.
Sure, you can answer, talk, speak, tell us what's going on. Feel free to jump into this.
Thank you, and I apologize. I was finishing up a town hall on Suffolk Downs, and so from that I came to here. So I apologize for being late. I did want to discuss some general things. I do think my office has been pretty much attuned to a lot of the development in the North End, in that in many cases in the parts that are my district, the developers do come to our office, and the first thing we always say is go back out to the community and don't come back until we actually know that you've had a thorough conversation with both groups. And with that, it was the same with the recent development plans for, I think it was section of North Street, with folks who wanted to discuss cannabis in the North End, with the Nazaro Center, all of these different kinds of things. And I would point that on the Nazaro Center especially, one of the things I was proud of is helping to get architectural students to come in and help design and work with the community for something that they would want to support. So I feel part of my leadership and my role is not just to talk about the no's, but to protect the neighborhood and what the yeses mean, and to push that on developers. And so I'm very proud of that kind of conversation, even in the tougher ones, especially when it comes to Christopher Columbus statue. I believe that we need to have those conversations, and we need to discuss those things, especially in development. Pulling back now to some of the points I wanted to highlight. I know the community is aware that outdoor dining has been extended to December 1st. And so I continue to collect thoughts, concerns, and I really think that in many cases, some people are looking at this becoming permanent, or at least some section of it being annual. And I wanted to get ahead of that conversation so that our community is helping to drive whatever happens, that our needs, our concerns, and our ability to have, I think, quality of life is accounted for with whatever decisions. We are an economic engine, but we don't want the economic engine to overrun our daily lives for the sake of making wonderful food and helping our restaurants thrive, while some of us are still struggling either with parking or concerns about COVID. So I think that there's a balancing act that we need to have, and I just wanted to bring that up, and my office is continually open to any concerns that you have. Anissa Sabi-George, my colleague, really thoroughly covered BPS. I was going to give an update on that. I did support the phased-in plan, and I do hear from parents who literally up until this Monday night felt that they didn't know what cohort their students or their children were going to be in. And part of this moment is, I think, our role is to rise to the occasion as elected officials, not just in making sure that the schools are safe, but there's something beautiful about being a senior. There's something beautiful about going to school, and what traditions and what things are we going to create now, so that this moment isn't just something that we're grinning and bearing it through and just hating it and we're just surviving it, but trying to thrive at this time and moment, and making sure that there is true equity. My biggest concern is how kids are already struggling getting to school. How are we going to make sure we don't lose chunks of our population forever? So that's what I was on BPS. I'm having a transit town hall on the 29th, and you can register with Benetti, or it's on Facebook as well, on the Blue Line, specifically making it more bike accessible. I think that that's really important, and one of the drop-off points would very likely be the aquarium place, and one of the online points or onboarding points would be aquarium if you're going to go north of the city or northeast. So we wanted to talk about that. There's some other major conversations that are happening in the city council is around police reform, and that's continuing to happen, specifically because the police union contracts are approved at the city council. So they're being negotiated now, but the finished product comes to the city council for approval. And so we started hearings early on that. I'm very happy about that, to discuss overtime, to discuss civilian flaggers, to discuss the residential requirements. You know, after 10 years, you no longer have to live in the city. And the point is for us not to sleep on this particular moment when we're discussing all the best ways to not just reform police, but also support the police officers as well. They are workers. They're deserving of rights and process. But they're unique in the work that in the service that they have for our city. So we need to take that leadership role and have that, I think, robust conversation. I did want to acknowledge something. I know for many of us, we lost out on an annual tradition that kind of brings our community together with our feast. I know some people had informal gatherings, but there's something special about that moment that all of us, and especially poor Benetti, look forward to every single year. And I've been trying my best to lift him from his depression and remind him that it's only temporary and that we celebrated. I visited his home. Of course, I donated to the Saint. He had a life-size version in his house. But for those who couldn't have that and couldn't celebrate, there's something beautiful and unique about feasts in the North End. And when you represent the North End like I do, I know there's a certain pain and a certain nostalgia that a lot of people have. Even people who are annoyed by them, still, this was their annual kind of thing. And I just feel like I wanted to acknowledge that loss in this conversation, that, you know, I missed them. A lot of people missed them. That was the thing. And I'm sorry for that. And I look forward to us coming back and having wonderful feasts next year. I am having a coffee hour on October 3rd in the North End. I think it's Cafe Paradiso, Michael? I think so. Sorry, I'll get the right location. It's at 10 o'clock. And again, for folks to come with any particular concerns or issues, I want to say it's on a Saturday. If you can let me know, Michael. I'm sorry, I don't have the Facebook up. And yeah, so I wanted to make sure that folks can comment, and we're going to do one in each one of the neighborhoods. I can start, though. I'm going to work with my staff about having office hours, not just coffee hours, but office hours where I come into to the city council, for those who feel comfortable to come and meet me there as well. So that might be more convenient for some of you. And then I think, two things I wanted to note at that we're finishing. The historic zoning amendment for affirmatively furthering fair housing. I introduced it. It's going to be finished this year, and it's really putting zoning and equity in the same family, and requiring our planners or the city to look at projects and understand who's going to live there, how they're going to live there. Is it green? Do they have access to transportation? Are we favoring, the commutes of suburbanites over the lungs of our city residents? Like, how are we making sure that we are building a true neighborhood that's equitable, that's diverse, and we're intentional about that and unapologetic about saying that? With the resources and money flowing into the city, we should not be widening the wealth gap. It should be getting smaller. And we should not be segregating ourselves economically. We should be more integrated. So that requires more than just hoping. That requires intentional planning. And that's what this amendment would require of the city. And the other home rule petition that's pending is the reform of the ZBA. Dan Ryan is the lead sponsor of that in the State House. And I believe, we certainly have the support of my colleagues and my delegation with I can't speak for Chairman Michlewitz, but I do know that they're all very sympathetic of reforming the ZBA and making sure that we have an urban planner and environmentalist on the ZBA. Also making sure we get rid of conflicts of interest and concerns, that there's an electronic process of notification. People could sign up an email under a project. All of the plans would be available for the first time for the life of the project, so that it wouldn't be a matter of whether you missed a meeting or not. That you could go click on 14 Bennett Street, see what the plans are, see what the revised plans are, be notified if the thing has been deferred. I can't imagine how many people are screaming when you organize the day and moment to go to the ZBA to find out the project's been deferred at that time. And so we're pushing for electronic notification well in advance that you could sign up for that, and basically modernizing the whole process to really acknowledge most people don't live and die within the zoning code or the ZBA schedule. Most of us live robust, very fruitful lives outside of it. But because these projects are permanent and impact our lives, we expect the city to meet us where we are. And those are the reforms that we're pushing for in the home rule petition that's pending. We really do. I actually am hopeful that it could get done this year. So those are some things pending at the State House, some things pending in the City Hall, my house. And then in terms of regular, normal issues we've been hearing, not so much on rodents that that is perpetual issue and concern. I know Councilor Flynn had a wonderful hearing today on rodent response and dealing with city services in general in our neighborhoods. One of the other things, oh, I see, I just got a comment. Do I read out the question, Cheryl, or do you?
Sure, we just muted ourselves, but sure, you can take a look at the questions, yeah.
Okay, I think it's from Ellen. There's a question, let's see, with regards to 14 Bennett Street.
Yes.
Okay.
Not Bennett. Yeah.
I hope you're following the 14 Bennett Street Rec-Free project issue. On September 14th, Munich voted for the second time to oppose, joining NEWRA to reject the Epsilon development, which is before the ZBA on November 10th. The developer has not responded since January to abutters' offer to negotiate a condo development within the existing structural envelope, which is registered by the Massachusetts Historical Commission. They still insist on adding a 5th new floor, open planter balconies, French door size windows. Please help us get a more appropriate development and reject the current proposal for this property. As I understand it, they've submitted new project plans. And so I expect those new project plans to come out to the community and to get your direct impact and opinions about what new plans are actually proposed. But right now, I oppose what has been presented. And it looks like NEWDEC does too. So I'm being consistent, Ellen. I've definitely looked to my community members directly impacted by the project. So I do not support it still. And I'm happy to, I've done this before, call up the developer and see if there's certain community members who would like to come to the office or a coffee and see what we can negotiate directly. If you're open to that, Ellen. So that's kind of, I want to make sure I covered most of the issues. I apologize.
All right. You had a long day today. We know you had some other 2-hour meeting prior to this, but if anyone has any questions, please type them in the chat.
Well, so we got a question through got emails here regarding some of the noise concerns on Hanover Street, Salem Street, regarding like motorcycles, moped scooters, loud scooters, everything like that. Now, I just know that that's been a growing issue in the neighborhood now with all the alternative transportation being used. I'm sure that you've gotten plenty of complaints about this as well. Councilor Edwards, just wanted to see what's going on with that.
No, I appreciate that. And it's a lot of it has to do with the monitoring of the noise levels and filing the 311 complaints and letting us know, especially if it's a certain time, if it's a certain kind of vehicle, that helps us when we're going to go enforce the noise ordinance to tell either ONS or police to be out there and to be at that time when noise start to kind of advance or grow. It was kind of the same understanding when it came with fireworks. It was, where is it mostly happening? What time is it mostly happening in order for us to get ahead and try and stop it from happening?
Terrific. All right. I think we're good. We're nearing 9 o'clock and we'd like to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, so like, just found out, I know this question's already been asked about from Damien earlier, but just talking about issues going on with small restaurants in the North End, or not even just North End in the city of Boston, regarding like tents or like outdoor heating or anything like that, what could be done for them with everything coming like that? Lydia, I know that this question was asked before you jumped on the call, if you could just speak to that.
Yeah, I think I've actually heard about that, and I understand the city is not willing to provide additional resources for the restaurants. So that's one thing. I don't think the city is going to be providing them in terms of for free for restaurants to have that capacity. The question is then if they are provided, or if the restaurants go ahead and provide it themselves, how are they going to be regulated to the point that you don't regulate them out of existence, but also making sure that that you have functional, warm places for people to eat. So it's balancing a lot of things. And I think a lot of people need to understand a lot of this is new, right? So it is frustrating because we don't always have immediate and concrete answers, but it's because we're also learning as we go along. And by new, I don't mean new to the world or new to all cities. I mean new to how we're doing this. So it is frustrating. And it's important for folks like Damien to continue to push the envelope, to push those questions. So we learn from this moment, because if this is going to be permanent or semi-permanent, we need to have all the issues aired out right now.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. We have a comment from Ernie Joseph. Representative Michlewitz, Senator Boncore, and Mr. Mayor. Well, Mayor Walsh is not on tonight, but John Romano and Rich McGinnis are. I think that public safety, traffic, historic value, public resources such as water, sewage, rubbish need to be well thought out before okaying these proposed development projects, such as the Tavistock development at Commercial Wharf and the project at the Aquarium Garage. Boston and its waterfront charm will be ruined forever at a time when we should be trying to preserve what we have. It's why people from all over the country come here. As a voter, I would like to know what all of your thoughts are regarding these precious spaces. Thank you. Your mics are all open, I believe.
Okay, I guess I'll start.
Thank you, Aaron.
First, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously something that we are first and foremost on our mind is access to the waterfront, being a harbor community, and creating better access to the waterfront and making it a more enjoyable space for everyone is something that we obviously consider greatly. I think you're going to be very happy with the improvements to Popolo and Langoni Field that are being developed right now. I think I put some about $4.5 million into the economic development bill to redevelop the area behind the skating rink, to redevelop that and make that a more accessible and user-friendly area, because it's been a broken down dock since I was a teenager. And so, having the waterfront discussion is first and foremost on our mind, and that obviously means development discussions. And, I would point to the work that the community and a lot of the people on this call were involved in related to Lewis Wharf, where we did not feel that development was something that was a positive to the area and a positive to the waterfront. And we, as a community, rejected that proposal. And I think if the community works together and sticks together on these things, we can make sure that whatever projects are, sitting along the waterfront are better ones. We haven't had a development project take place here or to see fruition since Battery Wharf in like the mid 2000s, I think is when they started developing that, or when they finished developing that. We hold it to high standards, and we should. And I'm proud of that we have high standards related to, how the development's done on the waterfront. And if it's not up to our standards, we're not going to support it. And I think that's very clear to the way this process has gone in the past, over the past, and it's going to continue that way. And I know developers have to, they have challenges that they have to meet and, to make it work. One of them is working with us as well. And I think that that's something that I think all my colleagues can share in feeling that's important.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to comment? Any other officials? I think we open mics.
Well,
I was going to say, if you all don't mind opening Rich McGinnis's mic as well, just as he can fill in some gaps for me too. But I did want to encourage you all as we go through this process that as you have feedback and as you have comments about these projects, especially the Harbor Garage project that's going through its open comment period, I do want to just remind you all of its open house that's coming up. And so as we talk here today, we know we had its first virtual meeting on September 9th that was well attended, and I want to thank those that did attend. But on October 1st is its first virtual open house as well. And you can find that information on BPDA's website about the project. I do want to encourage you all to attend and share your feedback, as well as leave your feedback with BPDA. Rich, I don't know if you have anything else that you'd like to add in at all.
This is the beginning of the process for reviewing this project. Comments are due on the project notification form, which is really the first submittal. We'll then issue a scoping determination, and that's where we ask the developer to provide more analysis related to climate change and sea level rise, transportation analysis, wind analysis. They will not be allowed to file a response until the climate ready downtown North End report is completed, and that'll actually be out mid-October. So it really is the beginning of the process. And as John said, there's a virtual workshop open house on October 1st. You get the link through our calendar. Also, the project notification form and the presentation materials are all posted on the BPDA website. The project manager is Ebony DeRosa. You can find her contact information through that. We'll certainly pass on the comments about extending the comment period, but do stay engaged. We formed an impact advisory group. Most of the elected officials on the site appointed members to the impact advisory group, so there are representatives looking closely at this on behalf of the elected officials. And this will probably take 4-6 months or even longer to get to the permitting process, and the state process could take well over a year. So stay engaged, sign up for calendar alerts, and let us know if you need anything else.
One of the concerns I have during development, especially when we build in the downtown area or in the South Boston waterfront, the Seaport area, when we continue to build residential developments, we also want to balance that with basic city services in that neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Whether it's police presence, fire presence, EMS presence. So as I know it's not your neighborhood, but as we build the South Boston waterfront, what's important to me is, how will the police get in there? How will the fire? How will EMS get in there? But the same example applies here in the downtown and the North End area, making sure that we have basic city services as we continue to grow the population in and around the downtown area as well.
I'll just be very brief. What everyone else said, but also really recognizing and be grounded in the fact this is a natural resource, a matter of equity, to make sure that people have not just access to the beautiful waterfront, but that we are designing it so that it is a place where all people feel welcome as well. So what we build around there, we want to make sure it's not just all luxury and not just exclusive, but also that people truly feel that this is their waterfront as well. I also wanted to note one thing I've been asked to say consistently and publicly is that the people, please throw away your masks. They're actually made of plastic. They don't biodegrade. And that's talk about an increase in trash actually in the area. It's with a lot of the COVID response masks, and the protective gear is actually finding itself in a lot of our water ways and on our waterfront. So just to remind people to throw them away.
Thank you. John Romano, do you have any more updates for the mayor? I know he had a last minute personal issue he had to take care of this evening.
Yeah, so I know for ourselves, I can go through and share some of the updates that we've had. What I can tell you is that for ourselves, I can share some of our COVID-19 updates in the city. So as of September 14th, the positive test rate was 2.8%, which is slightly up from the 1.5% a couple weeks ago. But we're seeing an increase in positive test rates for several neighborhoods, except for East Boston, which is decreasing, and we're closely monitoring this data. But in the North End and Back Bay area, they remain some of the lowest in the city at 0.9%. Just the North End zip codes are very low as well. And for the week ending in September 7th, with over 500 people tested, there were less than 10 cases reported. And we're targeting responses where needed. We obviously need to continue to remain vigilant with social distancing, mask wearing, washing our hands, and we encourage everyone to get tested, especially living in a household where people are working or you've been around other people in any kind of gatherings. And you can always find that testing information at boston.gov/coronavirus. We did want to address, we talked about schools. So yesterday was the first day of schools for BPS and all students began with remote learning. The optional hybrid learning for all students, starting with the highest need students at the youngest students, and the youngest students start no sooner than October 1st. And we're paying very close attention to the public health metrics and data to help us inform that opinion and that date. In every step, families have the choice of whether to opt into hybrid learning or stay fully remote. We talked about some street upgrades. Earlier in the summer, we launched the Healthy Streets program, which included pop-up bike lanes downtown, free 90-day passes to Blue Bikes for essential workers, and making bus routes safer, more reliable. And we're making these upgrades permanent. Starting this fall, we will install new bus lanes on neighborhood streets where working people rely heavily on MBTA. And we're making many of our pop-up bike lanes into permanent separate bike lanes this fall. We'll also be adjusting traffic signals to increase safety and begin redesigning intersections to work better for pedestrians. You can see more of that information on boston.gov/healthystreets. And the pandemic has pushed us to be more creative with our public spaces. As we've seen with outdoor dining, we're trying to find ways to be able to make our roads more accessible for different uses and activities. And that's been one thing that's come out of this situation. I did want to also talk.
Hey, John, sorry to interrupt. John, I don't mean to interrupt right now. I just know it's like a little past 9. I just wanted to see if there was anything else that you had to like update based on the conversations tonight or anything else like that.
No, the only other update that I would kind of give from there is that when it comes to the Travis Scott development itself, is that Travis Scott has not submitted any project filings with us, but it would need to reach a consensus with the Commercial Wharf Condo Association, and both parties would need to realize the outstanding requirements for the Harbor Walk on the south side of Commercial Wharf, and also address the flood paths where the Waterfront, Columbus Park, and the Commercial Wharf interface. So as we're going through here, we haven't had any direct filings or any filings from Travis Scott Development yet.
Terrific. Thank you very much. We're going to close this out. It's just after 9 and our Zoom call is going to end momentarily. So thank you, everyone. Stay safe. Enjoy the fall season. And we'll see you back here soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.